Tour de France is the biggest bike race of the year, and with the eyes of the world on them, the teams bring the best bikes and kit they can get their hands on. With that in mind, we've been touring the team mechanics trucks looking for the hottest and most interesting custom bikes. We've seen custom paint jobs, pro mechanic hacks, and measured the setups of some of the biggest names in the sport. But before we show you all of that, a big thanks to Lezyne for sponsoring this part of the video, and if you enjoy it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more Tour de France content. So this is Egan Bernal's Pinarello Dogma F. Now I know it's Bernal's for two reasons. Firstly, of course, it's got a little name sticker, but it also has a yellow and pink little decal attachments just to denote that Bernal has won both the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia. Now, of course, Bernal hasn't been at the Tour de France for a little while because of his injury, but it's great to see him back, and of course, he's got a lovely bike to take him around France. The Dogma F is Pinarello's all-round aero race bike, aimed to be both lightweight and aero. It's kind of one bike to do it all, so Team Ineos don't have, say, like a lightweight bike, an endurance bike, and an aero bike. They just have this bike for all stages, mountains or flats. In terms of signature Pinarello details, we've got the wavy on the fork, the kind of wavy seat stays. We've got this bow to the top tube as well. The head tube comes quite narrow into a little point that's almost like the bow of a ship as well. Bernal is running the latest Shimano 12-speed Dura Ace with the 54 40-tooth chain rings, which are pretty much standard across the pro peloton now, paired with an 11 to 34-tooth cassette out the back. He's also running the Shimano Dura Ace C50 wheels with Continental GP5000 STR tyres, which are the standard road tyres. Now, we have seen a couple of teams, such as UAE Emirates, running the TT tyres. And I also saw some Ineos riders at the Giro d'Italia running the GP5000 TT tyres as well. So it will be interesting to see if Bernal sticks with these for all of the road stages, or if he makes a mid-race switch for certain stages. The front tyre appears to be slightly narrower than the rear. Now, I haven't measured it yet, but it looks like they've got maybe a 25 on the front and a 28 on the rear. I can only assume that's just to maximise the aerodynamic benefits on the front wheel, but still have that rolling resistance and comfort benefit at the rear. A couple more details I've just noticed. First of all, Bernal has a little K-edge chain catcher there. You know, you can't be too careful with chain drops. But also this Dogma F seat post has this really cool 3D printed titanium hardware on the saddle clamp. I assume that's just to shave a few last grams, but really cool to see and no doubt pretty expensive. I just had my tape measure and calipers out, and as suspected, it's a narrower tyre at the front and slightly wider one at the rear. This one measures about 27 mil, whereas the rear one's coming up at about 29.8 mil, so just under 30 millimeters wide. Bernal's running a 13 centimeter stem paired with a 38 centimeter wide handlebar. Not the most extreme setup in the peloton, but certainly longer and narrower than your average amateur setup. All right, let's see how much this weighs. Okay, 7.38 kilos. That's not bad at all, really, considering this is basically an aero bike. So we're here with Jonas Vingegaard's Cervelo S5. Now, it's got a special paint job for this tour, although actually, it's not even a paint job, it's a wrap. It's got a kind of star constellation going on across it and a Ride Your Dreams signature on there. Apparently this is in collaboration with a kind of theme park in the Netherlands, and it's just basically aimed at inspiring kids to kind of follow their dreams. Not necessarily in cycling, but wherever they see fit. But yeah, the wrap is said to be a lot lighter than if they were to paint it. Of course, you know, every gram counts at the Tour de France, and so they've just had this optimized wrap that gives them the graphics without adding too much weight. So as mentioned, this is Jonas's S5. The S5 is Cervelo's dedicated aero road bike. So it's got this hinge fork design up front and a super deep down tube, the kind of time trial style seat tube and seat stays and a thick aero seat post. It's also got this really cool split V-stem design. Now, each individual arm of the stem is like its own aerofoil tube, and then that connects to this aerofoil handlebar as well, which is really nice to see. Jonas's bike currently has a 2x SRAM red setup with 52 39-tooth chain rings and what looks like a 10 to 33-tooth cassette out the back. Now, we did ask about 1x. We're told that it's going to depend on the stage really, but we did see Jonas out on a 1x equipped Cervelo S5 just coming back from training a moment ago, so it looks like he will be riding that at this year's tour as well. The team have also said that Jonas will switch over to the R5 for the more mountainous stages because of course that bike is slightly lighter. In terms of the wheels, Jumbo is now on Reserve wheels. Now Reserve is a brand that's also owned by Cervelo. These are the Reserve 34 wheels, and actually they're tubular. These tyres look like the latest Vittoria Corsa Pros, although they don't actually have the hot stamps on them. So maybe these were the versions that were given to the teams before they were officially announced. In terms of eyeballing them, they look about a 28mm wide, but we'll check that in a moment. Lastly, on top of the seat post, Jonas is running the new Physique Vento Antares saddle. It's got a carbon base and carbon rail, so I expect that's pretty light too. We just had the handy tape measure out, and Jonas is running a 38cm bar, that's centre to centre. The stem is 120mm. It's kind of difficult to measure with the tape measure, but luckily it says it printed on the back. In terms of tyres, we've just measured those as well, and actually these aren't 28s. These are coming up fairly narrow at around 24.4mm, so I was way off there. Now in terms of weight, we're not quite sure of the size of this bike. It's either a 51 or a 54, so quite a small bike either way, but let's see what it weighs. Well, pretty good, 7.19. That's not bad at all for an Aero road bike. We're here at Team Astana now with Mark Cavendish's custom Wilier Filante SLR. As it's the Manxman's last tour, Wilier have provided him with this extra special custom paint job, and he's the only one on the team with a paint job like this. Now at a glance, it looks a kind of white and black with gold accents, but actually if you look very closely, the white has a kind of grey-white marble effect, and it's really nice to look up close. Especially looks really good with the kind of integrated handlebar, which is painted to match, as well as the details on the seat tube down here and the fork. The Filante SLR is Wilier's kind of all-round lightweight aero road bike. As you can see, it's kind of got truncated aerofoil tubes throughout across the fork and the head tube and the down tube, the seat tube and the seat stays, as well as the seat post, of course. It's also using this really nice integrated one-piece cockpit, and it's got a classic bend handlebar, which is something we rarely see these days. 20 or 30 years ago, every bike would have been equipped with a classic bend handlebar, but now there's only a few left in the peloton. It's even rarer to see them in this kind of integrated form as well, and I presume this has basically had to be custom made for Cavendish and anyone else on the team who wants one. One thing that is interesting to note is that Cavendish's Astana team has recently switched over to using head Vanquish wheels from its Karima wheels that it was using before. Now there is still a mix of wheels within the team, but on Cavendish's bike we've got the Vanquish RC6 Pros, which are the kind of top tier 60mm deep carbon rims. On this bike, those rims are set up with Vittoria Corsa Pro TLR tyres in a size 28C, though of course we'll have a little look at how those measure up in just a moment. In terms of everything else, well, Cavendish is running a Dura Ace 12-speed group set with the dual-sided power meter. He's got the 54 40-tooth chainrings up front, paired with a wide-ranging 11 to 34-tooth cassette out the back. Does also have this really trick SLF Motion oversized pulley wheel system as well. It's a little bit like the Ceramic Speed OSPWs, and basically it's got these oversized pulley wheels with ceramic bearings that just help to reduce the drivetrain drag just a little bit. Just a small extra gain, and it also looks pretty cool too. So just been up the front here taking our measurements, and it's fairly typical for a Tour de France rider. We've got a 13cm stem paired with a 40cm handlebar. It's fairly narrow, though it is kind of on the wider side of things that we've seen at this Tour, but you know, Cav's an older guy and perhaps isn't going to go as extreme as some of the younger guys in the race. One thing about this shape of handlebar is the way Cav has his levers on it gives this really long reach to the brake hoods, which helps him get a bit stretched out. It's kind of got this nice flat drop shape as well, which is, feels really good in my opinion when you're just kind of cruising along the flats. It's also quite nice to hold on to in a sprint. But one thing I've just noticed as well is that Cavendish has a single sprint shifter button just under here, and there isn't one on the other side, and presumably that's just allowing him to shift down to a bigger gear in the middle of the sprint. He's got no intention of shifting up, so it's a bigger gear or nothing, I guess. All right, so we're going to give this away now. It's a size small frame, but obviously it is an aero bike with pretty deep wheels, so it'll be interesting to see how much it weighs. About 7.76. So not super light, but as we've just said, it's an aero bike with deep rims, so about average for that kind of bike. This is Richard Carapaz's Cannondale SuperSix Evo Lab 71, painted with gold accents because Carapaz is currently the Olympic road race reigning champion. It's also got a number of interesting details, such as little sprint shifters under the hoods on his Shimano Dura Ace brake levers, which is something I've actually never seen before, but presumably allows him to shift with his thumbs whilst he's got his hands on the top of the shifters. Carapaz is running a Dura Ace group set with a Power to Max custom power meter and FSA chain rings and cranks. Vision SL45 carbon wheels, which looks like to have little custom pink accents for the EF team. The new Corsa Pro TLR tyres, which have been in the Pro Peloton for a while, but kind of recently announced. Up front, Carapaz has a Vision integrated handlebar Not the most extreme we've seen, looks like a kind of fairly short stem and a fairly kind of standard bar, maybe a 40 or a 42 centimeter. In terms of Lab 71, this is Cannondale's new like ultra high-end frame set tier, kind of equivalent of your Specialized S-Works or kind of Canyon CFR. The idea is it's kind of like the lightest, highest modulus carbon fiber that Cannondale has, and it kind of results in a claimed frame weight of 771 grams for presumably a size medium SuperSix Evo frame set. Of course, it will cost you a little bit extra though. Just a few other little details before we go. Have noticed that Carapaz is using the Speedplay or the Wahoo Speedplay Aero pedal. So instead of having a dual-sided entry, they've got this little kind of golf ball dimple style underneath. So when the rider clips in, the cleats are also dimpled and it kind of just blends smoothly with the shoe just for that tiny little extra aero gain. Now I think Carapaz is running a 51 centimeter size frame, and I've also noticed that up front they're running the a Vision ACR integrated bar rather than the Cannondale not integrated bar, and that's just to keep things sponsor correct. So let's actually get a measurement of this bar width then. Okay, so it's actually slightly narrower than I thought. It measures about 38 centimeters center to center at the hoods, so not quite as wide as I thought it was. So a little bit more aero, and obviously Carapaz is a slightly smaller rider. There you go. And of course, that all important weight. All right, well, we have around 7.37, 7.38 kilos. Not too bad, really. So this is Mathieu van der Poel's Canyon Aeroad CFR. Now this is quite an interesting bike as it's actually been around for a few years now. Originally released around 2020, this bike has since seen a slight minor update, but just to Mathieu's bike. Now, whilst the normal Canyon Aeroads have a seat post clamped down here, Mathieu's bike has seen it move just to up here. And I think that means it's using a standard seat post rather than a kind of more flexible one that clamps further down in there. But otherwise, it's largely the same bike. It's got the aero profiles all over the bike, including the aero profile fork, the aero profile down tube, the heavily aero profiled seat stays, and the seat tube, as well as the seat post, of course. It's also got this really cool integrated adjustable handlebar up front, which allows you to basically widen or narrow the bar depending on your choice. Now the Alpecin Koenig bikes all have pretty nice paint jobs. They've got a kind of like glossy, glittery purple fade. Van der Poel's bike really stands out because of this glossy white. Now, as well as the all white paint job, Van der Poel is also running a white saddle and white bar tape. And again, that's just something that we're not seeing very much of at the Tour these days. Presumably it's going to get a little bit dirty. It's been raining a little bit here in Spain, but you know, it's Van der Poel, and I expect if it gets a little bit dirty, the mechanics will just swap it out every day. Now, in terms of kit, Van der Poel is running the kind of now new standard Shimano Dura Ace 12 speed with the 54 40 tooth chain rings up front. And he's pairing that with an 11 to 30 tooth cassette out the back. He's running Dura Ace C50 carbon wheels, and those wheels are shod with the new Vittoria Corsa Pro TLR tyres. And those are set up tubeless, as you'd probably expect. Last couple of little details, Van der Poel has this race number holder just kind of epoxied onto his seat tube. That looks really neat and tidy. He's also got a really trick 3D printed Wahoo holder out the front of his handlebars. Looks super light, probably quite aero too, as it just sits in line with the handlebars, puts it in a nice easy position to see, looks really good. And of course, Van der Poel doesn't look like he has super narrow handlebars, but he does tilt his lever hoods in just for a slightly more aero, narrower position when he's riding the bike. Just had the tape measure and the calipers out, and actually it's not that extreme a setup. So Van der Poel is running a 12 centimeter stem paired with a 40 centimeter bar. That's kind of fairly wide compared to what we've seen elsewhere. In terms of the tires, around 29.3 millimeters wide, which is about average now, but these are 28C tires, so they're coming up slightly larger on the Dura Ace rims. Now, in terms of weight, let's have a little look. 7.94, so not really super light, but obviously this is a complete aero bike with deep wheels and all the accoutrements of a full aero bike. So this is the Dare VSRu of Alexander Kristoff of Team Uno X. Pretty cool bike, and actually one that I've not seen in person before. Obviously this is an aero frame set with deep section wheels, pretty big chain rings. Obviously Kristoff's a sprinter, he's won 4 stages of the Tour de France in the past, and I expect he's hoping for a little bit more in this race. Some of the interesting details on this bike is it's got this cool kind of extended, interesting head tube around the front. So fully integrated handlebar, which is pretty narrow even for a big guy like Kristoff. Little wax chain here, which is quite nice to see. See, fairly big chain rings up front, but with a kind of climbing cassette out the back. Dura Ace. We've also got these lovely DT Swiss wheels, and with these Schwalbe Pro 1 tubeless tyres have this interesting kind of blue outline around the edge of the tyre, which is something I haven't seen before and isn't on the tyres you'll buy at the shop. So not quite sure what this is, but we'll do a little digging, and if we can find out, we'll let you know. So one thing that we've seen a number of teams doing is the little sticker on the front wheel just tells the mechanics how much sealant they put in and when they put it in, because obviously keeping on top of tubeless sealant is a pretty big job for the mechanics. So just a quick note to know that when the tyres were topped up, when they need to do it again. One thing that's quite interesting is that Kristoff's about 5'11" according to Wikipedia, but he's actually riding a size small frame. And we just seen Simon Clark's bike a minute ago with a 15 centimetre stem, but Kristoff's is actually relatively normal, about 12 centimetres. That's the kind of stem size I would ride, so that's kind of unusual. But I think the choice for a smaller frame is likely because obviously a smaller frame is kind of lighter, might also be slightly stiffer as well, so a little bit of a gain there, and maybe just changes that ride feel for the way the pros like. One other cool detail is, you know, as a kind of former Norwegian champ, Kristoff also has this little Norwegian national flag just on his chainstay there. Quite a nice little detail that you often get on a pro bike. Now, of course, I am on the patrol for narrow handlebars. This one looks quite narrow. I think it's about 38 centimetres, so let's just have a little check. Yeah, a 38 centimetre centre to centre handlebar. Pretty narrow, not extreme, but obviously useful aero gain and just makes it slightly easier to move through the peloton at the end of a fast race. So another cool thing I've just noticed as we've been walking around the bike is Kristoff has his saddle slammed all the way forward for a kind of really steep, effective seat post angle. Just on the back of here as well, it's got a little attachment, which I think might be a little dongle attachment for the kind of TV data stream that you often get now, kind of like live rider power data and heart rate data and that sort of thing. And also the mechanics have marked his saddle height with a little gold marker pen, just so they don't get it wrong. Okay, and the all-important weight test. Ooh, about 7.72 kilos. So not super light. Does have a pretty kind of lightweight paint job with a clear coat over bare carbon, but you know, we have got super deep rims. This is obviously an aero bike, it's a sprinter's bike, so not too bad, all things considered. So just over here at the Jayco truck, and just spotted a number of different tyre choices in use today. So we've got the new tubeless Corsa Pros on this bike. This rider is using tubular Vittoria Corsa Pros, but over here, we've got one rider on the old time trial tyres set up tubeless. So just a number of tyre choices going on, and I guess the riders have individual preferences. Now here we have Tadej Pogacar's bike. Now this is pretty cool, and as you'd expect for the two-time Tour de France winner, there's a lot of super expensive custom stuff on this bike. So this is the Colnago V4 RS frame set. It's Colnago's latest frame set, said to be slightly more aero than the previous version. It's also paired with a new handlebar up front, which we'll talk about in a minute, but just starting further back here, obviously Tadej's got a Shimano Dura Ace group set, but it's not standard at all. We've got these really cool carbon tie chain rings, which are kind of like carbon fiber with a titanium outer tooth profile, and obviously those are just designed to save a little bit of weight. Also got some carbon tie brake rotors on both front and rear wheels, again just to save a little bit more weight. Now this seat post is pretty trick as well. It's not the standard seat post as many of his teammates are using. To me, this looks like a Dorimo seat post, and that's a brand which makes like ultra lightweight parts for a certain number of bikes. And it doesn't have a sponsor logo on, but I'm pretty sure I know what that is. And it's also got this cool custom little 3D printed race number holder on it as well. In terms of chainring sizes, Tadej is running 54 40 tooth chainring, which is quickly becoming the kind of new standard in the peloton, but it does have an 11 to 34 tooth cassette out back, so still has an easy gear for those climbs. In terms of the wheel set, this is Envy's latest SES 4.5 wheel set. It's got Continental GP 5000 TT tyres, so those are the time trial specific tyres. Now, you know, normally we don't see too many time trial specific tyres in road races, but it's actually something we've been seeing more of. And I guess the teams feel confident enough that these tyres are going to hold up for the road stages, and so they're just going for that extra kind of rolling resistance and weight gain. These wheels have a super wide internal rim width, and it's plumping up the tyres to a really wide size. Now we'll measure them in a moment, but it's kind of crazy how wide these tyres are, just from a kind of, you know, considering only a few years ago, 25mm was the standard in the pro peloton. As you might expect, Tadej also has his own kind of custom saddle. It's a Pro logo scratch, but it's got some really cool details, like a little bit of yellow from the Tour de France and also the Slovenian national flag. One cool detail we just spotted back at the mechanics truck as well was we think these are brand new tyres, and we saw one of the mechanics just scraping them with a little pair of scissors. When you get a tyre out of the box, it often has a little bit of coating on it, and I'm guessing they think that there's a chance that might reduce the grip. So he was just scraping off that kind of top layer of that outer coating just to make sure it doesn't have any accidents. Now, this is really cool. So this is a new integrated Envy one-piece carbon handlebar. Now Colnago does make its own integrated handlebar for the V4 RS, but by the looks of things, Tadej's had something kind of made to his spec. So it's got a 13 centimeter stem and a 36 centimeter wide handlebar. But Tadej also has the lever hoods just tilted in ever so slightly. It's not the most extreme, but it's definitely just giving him a slightly narrower position. And it's also got these flared drops as well, just as you get a kind of little bit more control when you're descending. Now, to my eye, it looks a lot like they've taken the kind of NVS Aero stem and the NVSES Aero bar and basically kind of mashed them together into a slightly more efficient setup. Now, you know, a separate bar and stem isn't causing loads of drag, but obviously, you know, it's the Tour de France and every little helps. So I've just been down here with my handy little calipers, and this front tyre is measuring up at a pretty big 31.3 millimeters. Also spotted that the Tadej has little sprint shifters just under his hoods as well. But at the back, 32.2 millimeters wide, which is the biggest tyre we've seen so far here at the Tour de France. And again, yeah, it's wild, really. We're so used to seeing, you know, narrow tyres in the pro peloton, but it just shows that, you know, one of the top teams, potentially the guy who's going to win the Tour de France, is going to do so on a tyre that, you know, a few years ago would have been gravel tyre size. So in terms of weight, this one comes in at 7.23, 7.24, so pretty light, but not quite 6.8 kilos. So there you have it, some of the hottest bikes from the 2023 Tour de France. But which was your favorite? Do let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.